Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Hope it's Saturday, also known as Catterday on the internet. I'm Gabriella Coleman, and I'm a former Hope speaker. For the first time this year, I helped behind the scenes, and it's really moving and inspiring to see so many people work together to make something like this happen. I raise this as a segue to introduce today's keynote, Libby Liu, who has for decades worked tirelessly, often away from the limelight, to support and make possible something that many of us support, internet freedom. And she's done so in countless ways. So many of us are familiar with tools and probably use them. Tools like Tor, Signal, Uni, I'm wearing my Uni shirt, Deflect. In different ways, these tools aid countless activists, dissenters, journalists, human rights activists, victims, and they help them here and abroad to move through the internet a bit more safely in the face of technical censorship and worse, being targeted directly by governments and law enforcement. We often feature and praise, and for good reason, the technologists, designers, and other project members who build the software. But we must not forget that these technologies are also created by people like Libby Liu who make something just as important. They make the programs and organizations like the Open Technology Fund that support technological development. They support security training and language translation and so much more. So the OTF was founded by Libby Liu as a program in 2011 when she served as president of Radio Free Asia. Under her leadership, the OTF thrived. It provided a clear-sighted vision and resources so that hackers and public interest technologists and activists could build the tools enabling millions to organize and communicate without fear of arrest and retribution. The OTF reached a milestone in 2019 when it was spun off as its own organization to become a standalone nonprofit, and Liu was appointed as the inaugural CEO. The future for internet freedom looked bright. All of this is now under threat. Libby, again, working so tirelessly for so long, was catapulted into the limelight when she took a public stand against the Trump administration, who was seeking to dismantle the OTF as we know it. She resigned in June 2011 after word got out that the OTF and the parent organization, the US Agency for Global Media, they sought to support proprietary software instead of the open source tools that was the bread and butter of OTF. Now they're trying to eviscerate the program by defunding them. So today we're gonna learn about the history of these projects, why they're being targeted, and hopefully we could start to think about ways to ensure all the work that Libby and so many have done to aid these important human rights technology projects can continue in the future. Before I turn it over, I would like to thank her for all that she has done, and I hope you will too. But for now, please join me in virtually welcoming Libby Liu.
Thank you, Gabriella. That was way, way, way overly gracious. And honestly, you should be our spokesperson. You're phenomenal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here and letting me talk about the Open Tech Fund and our current situation. I thought I'd start by talking about OTF for anyone who doesn't know about OTF, how it came to be, what it is, why it matters so much from my perspective. And then I'll talk about our current state of affairs and do my best to answer questions on where OTF is today and into the future. So, sound good? OTF was born out of crisis. It was created as a program within Radio Free Asia, which I led for 16 years before leaving to stand up the OTF Corporation last year. RFA, for those of you who are unfamiliar with our little news network, was created to be the news and information lifeline for people living under repressive regimes in East Asia, from the CCP to KJU to the Vietnamese government and Burmese junta. Radio Free Asia's work was dangerous by nature. We all know that information is power, and that's why tyrants love to control the media and now the internet. In RFA's markets, news and information are censored and manipulated to the point that citizens cannot even have self-determination. At RFA, our journalists, sources, researchers, audiences, and their families have always been targeted by the regimes for whom information controls are essential to the disempowerment of their people. These regimes cannot survive without total control of the information landscape by threat, harassment, intimidation, lawfare, economic pressure. By 2011, these authoritarian governments had honed their expertise to weaponize the World Wide Web against those who were the intended beneficiaries of a free and open internet for all. It became undeniably clear that journalists, frontline defenders, activists, researchers, and anyone trying to do good work on issues that matter were increasingly under threat when working in these hostile environments. Places where human rights, gender equality, religious freedom, democracy, environmentalism, LGBTQI are all verboten. And working on these issues will put a target on you and your family and anyone you talk to. And the regimes invest mightily in tactics to silence the truth and deter people from having and sharing fact-based ideas, often to tragic ends. So many times our people were targeted, harassed, detained, jailed, tortured, and disappeared. All the time, our signals were jammed, our websites blocked, our satellite providers dropped our contracts. Anyway, anyhow, anything to keep people from knowledge, not carefully scripted by government propagandists. You can imagine how intolerable and tragic a situation is when an organization dedicated to telling the truth is made up of individuals who are persecuted for doing exactly that. Just one of our Uyghur journalists' entire extended family was disappeared into the camps just for being part of a family WeChat group. So in 2011, with an RFA board chairman who just really got it, we created the Open Tech Fund to get us back on track to a free and open internet for all. We were really lucky. Me and my original crew, Sasha Meinrath and Andrew McLaughlin, Dan Meredith, you might know him as Blah, Adam Lin, we created a program that embodied our core values and commitment to open source technology. OTF is designed to be transparent, inclusive, informed, and dynamic in order to circumvent censors, protect privacy, secure digital communications, and be on the leading edge of applied research that could immediately be adopted by anyone under attack. We wanted to make it easy for anyone with a good idea to apply. So we use an easy web interface and we remove the need for costly professional proposal writers and bundlers. We wanted to make sure tech was safe to use rather than adding danger to our users. We wanted to create an ecosystem that invested in building capacity in at-risk communities and create a space for super smart people like everybody in this group to apply your talents for the cause and yet still earn a living. To achieve this, OTF baked in mandatory collaboration between projects, so no one had to recreate any wheels. We filled in key barriers to usage, including the Localization Lab, which crowdsources translations into 200 some languages and dialects, and the Usability Lab, which ensures that the user-facing parts of the technology are customized for ease of use and appropriateness to the communities that use them. We ensure that smarter people than us had eyes on and input to separate the wheat from the chaff with our volunteer advisory council from multiple related disciplines, researchers, policymakers, scientists, technologists, user groups, digital safety trainers, and journalists. We funded fellowships to build capacity and expertise in information controls, applied research, and in localized digital security practitioners and tool implementers. We built in requirements for security code audits to ensure that our technology does not further endanger users already in danger. And we delved into addressing vulnerabilities in the internet's core infrastructure, which everybody benefits from, but nobody seems to want to maintain. And we created a cohort of complementary private funding partners to provide life cycle support for project needs that are outside of the OTF remit. During a normal year, OTF creates safe spaces for at-risk users like the IFF, for the users, the technologists, the usability experts, the advocates, all to come together and inform each other's work. These personal connections are critical to the sustainability of our solutions and the constant iterative innovations that we need to deploy with every advancement of censorship and surveillance technology. As Blah and Adam and Lindsay and everyone continue to blaze the trail and evolve OTF into what it is today, we built a team of subject matter experts inside the OTF. These folks are the real power of the Open Technology Fund, including CTO Sarah, who will be on next with Josh King. Working with the OTF team is one of the greatest privileges of my life. Everyone on the OTF team would rather be in the field, fighting on the front lines, doing digital trainings and interventions, researching and developing tech, but they are so deeply committed to the internet freedom movement that they work at OTF, where they have to diligently vet thousands of submissions a year, do hands-on program management support, reconcile tedious receipts and travel expense claims, and connect their projects with each other and additional support and resources. They do this because OTF must function to allow everyone else to thrive in their good work. By 2019, when OTF spun off into its own standalone corporation, it had demonstrated that huge impact could come from relatively minuscule funding. And OTF was rewarded with increasingly larger annual budgets, culminating in the $20 million annual budget for OTF's corporation inaugural year this year. Under the great leadership of Laura Cunningham, whose career has been dedicated to internet freedom, OTF is better equipped than ever to meet the ever more sophisticated digital threats and the global expansion of censorship and surveillance technology. Until June 2020, when the new CEO was sworn into office at USAGM, our grantor agency. Why does OTF matter? OTF is the backbone of a global ecosystem engaged in ensuring everybody who is online is connected to a free and open internet. Our mandate to fund research and technology that expand unrestricted access online for people living in closed societies around the world is the front line of defense and protection for everybody living under digital authoritarianism. The most essential thing that OTF has cultivated through these years, through radical transparency and our iterative program improvements, is trust. But today we are in crisis again. The agency entrusted by the US Congress to provide funding to OTF is starving the corporation to the detriment of essential projects battling regimes that deploy them against their own people. As you may know, USAGM is holding currently about $20 million in funds that have been allocated to OTF on their own congressionally approved fiscal year 19 and 20 internet freedom spend plans and our agreed upon financial plan, including OTF funds already committed to projects that we began while under RFA. OTF has not received any of our allocated funding since May 2020, when we received our third quarter funds. Despite the fact that I signed a grant agreement for $11 million in fourth quarter funding before I was abruptly fired on June 17, and despite numerous promises of this or that small infusions of our allocated funds, OTF continues to be starved of funding. OTF has required on numerous occasions, including as recently as Tuesday, that these funds be transferred in order to maintain our critical operations and projects, to no avail. As you may be aware, in our current crisis, OTF will run out of money in September, despite taking drastic measures to keep the corporation alive until help can arrive. As we've shared publicly, OTF has already been forced to take heartbreaking actions in response to this dire financial crisis, including stopping the issuance of any new contracts, terminating several active contracts, and pausing all ongoing solicitations. Unfortunately, USAGM continues to be unresponsive to our request for funding and continues to just arbitrarily hold $20 million of OTF congressionally allocated funds. And as a result, OTF has been forced to issue stop work orders to 49 of our approximately 60 active internet freedom projects this week, bringing over 80% of our projects and services to a complete halt. This arbitrary and unnecessary funding crisis has now compromised the work of our projects and jeopardized the lives of millions of users who rely on our technologies worldwide. Further, this funding crisis is needlessly undermining even our grantor agencies' reach and impact abroad. According to their own analytics, 85% of USAGM's audience in Iran and 40% of their audience in China rely on OTF-supported technologies to access USAGM content. By withholding resources for these tools, the agency is preventing its own audiences from reaching its own content. And in addition, USAGM is putting at risk its own journalists who rely on secure communication technologies supported by OTF and jeopardizing security of their online content, which benefits from OTF-supported secure hosting and DDoS mitigation technologies. Not to mention that these actions will directly strengthen the hands of internet freedom adversaries like the Chinese and Iranian governments, who are actively working to undermine freedom and democracy all over the world. Cutting off funding for these critical tools not only compromises the Open Technology Fund's mission, but sabotages the agencies as well. OTF's mission to advance internet freedom globally supports free press, free speech, advances universal human rights, and supports those working for freedom everywhere. Being prevented from fulfilling this essential mission is counterproductive to all of our shared goals and needlessly destructive. OTF has implored, begged, pleaded USAGM to release funding as soon as possible so that we can resume this truly critical work to counter this repressive censorship and surveillance abroad. We have been persisting in our work despite the fact that no money has come in the door in 3 months, and despite the numerous promises that they would come. So that's our current situation, and I really want to thank you for listening, and I'll try to answer as many questions as possible now in the time remaining. If anybody is interested in being updated on the ongoing conflict, please go to saveinternetfreedom.tech, and there you'll find, the ability to sign on to a letter, and also you'll receive all the updates of the many moving parts that are going on right now as we try to save this incredibly important organization. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that overview and history, both longer history and present history. I know the present history is particularly hard to cover because it's impacting so many organizations and people on the ground. So thank you for that. And thank you for leaving a lot of time for questions as well. So we're gonna just jump into that right now. I've already have some coming in. So I'll start with one here. So it seems clear you're someone driven by purpose. Would you share how that purpose, and purpose is capitalized, I like that, has evolved and continued throughout your career?
I would say that it's because my parents were refugees from the Communist Revolution in China in 1949. They escaped on a boat to Taiwan, where more than 50% of the people died en route. And they came to America in 1960 and 63 to go to school and enjoy freedom. And this is where I was born. But from the very beginning, because of their early experiences, they feared authorities. And I've seen them be victimized over and over again because of this, what I would call post-traumatic stress disorder. So my parents have spent their entire lives helping other people and deeply ingrained that we have no reason to be here if we're not going to do better for everyone. So I think that that's why my whole career has been spent in this way. Thanks for asking, but I don't think I'm important here.
Okay, so let me get to some other questions. Someone asked, to what extent has OTF been influenced by corporate lobbies?
Corporate lobbies, I would say zero. Actually, nobody influences OTF. OTF has a famously rigorous due diligence process and is radically transparent. I can't even get a project funded, even if I think it's the most important project on the earth because of my unique understanding of whatever country we're dealing with, like North Korea, which unfortunately I've become an expert in the last 2 decades. So nobody influences the OTF determinations. But we have a massive advisory council and that whole team of subject matter experts who really make sure that everything is done right, that we're not wasting money on shit that's already been developed, that we're not, just paying a bundler, a commission off the top to do a professional proposal for other people. It's just not our thing. We are completely independent, and that's the problem, right? The agency does not want us to be independent. The agency does not want us to make fact-based determinations.
I'm gonna ask my own question.
Sure. Prerogative.
Get back. There's a lot coming in, but Trump has been in power since 2016. It's 2020. Why now? Why is this happening now? Why didn't this happen 2 years ago? I mean, this might be very hard to answer, but a lot of us were wondering whether this was going to happen, and we felt good that it didn't in the first few years. So it felt like it came a little bit out of left field.
Yeah, I can tell you what my speculation and theories are on this, and they're all my own. This person, Michael Pack, was nominated by Trump 2 years ago or so. And there's a lot of skeletons in his closet. And he was highly unqualified for the position he's holding on that now. So the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, whose job it is to confirm any nomination from the Trump administration for foreign policy, successfully, was digging into who he is, what he is, trying to understand where he's coming from. The first year, he didn't even submit his paperwork. So he was, not even on the playing field. I understand he felt that he should not have to fill his paperwork out, which is astonishing to some of us. But eventually he did. And in the last, probably since the beginning of the year, he joined up with a lobbyist group that is exceedingly aggressive and completely committed to funding one tool that has not been able to make it through a competitive review process. And they are so outraged and so much believe that this time they're asking now for $30 million to go to this one proprietary technology, which they think will break the Great Firewall of China. I mean, the technology this has been going on for 10 years. So it's hard to even imagine that they're even up to speed, let alone able to defeat the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, it's ridiculous, honestly. From a user perspective, a human perspective, you need to have as many options as possible to meet the needs that you're facing, right? Our belief and philosophy is that there should be many options on the table so that users can pick whatever works best for them. And so much of this is based on trust. And when you have open source technology, people can test it. People can find vulnerabilities and, patch those vulnerabilities. I mean, I just can't even imagine trusting all of these people's lives to a completely opaque proprietary technology. But this lobby is incredibly powerful, incredibly aggressive, and really helped get them over the line.
Right.
And so I knew from the beginning that I was going to be a target. So I tried to fall on my sword to protect others because I knew that he was highly pressured to remove me for objecting to this lobby for all these years. And unfortunately, that didn't work. But that's what happened. There was a last ditch push helped by this lobby group, with this agenda, which is completely antithesis to what OTF is.
Well, that's helpful context to understand, why this moment and why now. So let me go to another question. Is there any way that private citizens can donate to the OTF, or is there too much red tape to do so? Would it be kind of swallowed up by another organization? Can you even get funds to them?
So this is a really good question. I'm so thankful to whoever who asked it. Because when we created the corporation and we created our first grant agreement with the agency, because we're a private nonprofit corporation, we said one of the reasons we want to do this is because so many people want to help support this great work, but they don't want to write a check to Radio Free Asia because anybody who has investments or board members or trustees who are working in China can never be associated with Radio Free Asia. So the idea was that OTF as its own corporation could, in fact, then fundraise and take donations directly. Unfortunately, at that time, we were working with the old regime, which was phenomenal and really practical and understood the good work we do. And in the grant agreement, we have a clause that says that the agency has to approve any outside funding we get. And the reason for that language is consistent with other US government stuff, because they're afraid that you're going to take the money from China or Vietnam or, some adversary, which we knew we would never do. So we said, sure, let's put that clause in because we'll never try to take money from these people. But now, since they're starving us of money and we're going bankrupt and there are many organizations and people that want to help, we can't take the money because the agency won't approve it because of this stupid clause, which we never thought would come into this context. I mean, who could ever think so, right? I mean, everybody, the Office of Budget Management, which is the administration, and Congress approved everything, our budget for $20 million. So we figured, it was going to be fine. And we would never take money from suspect people anyway. And we're radically transparent. So we would tell anyone, who gives us money. But unfortunately, today we're in the spot. Thank God we have a lot of private funding partners because we are trying to work with them to help, continue some of these projects that are underfunded now. And so we are doing what we did when it was at RFA. We have private joint funders, but we don't have the freedom to take funding that will help save the organization, which shows their intent.
Right. All right, so I have another question, and don't feel like you have to answer it. Never do for any question, but someone is asking, what's the name of the proprietary closed source tool the new USAGM chief is pushing?
Ultrasurf.
Okay. So people can do research, look it up.
Yeah, you sure can. And, the Ultrasurf lobby has been working very, very aggressively for many, many years. And to try to hide their agenda, they have said that they support 4 technologies that they think are phenomenal and, unfairly treated by us. And those are Ultrasurf, Siphon, Lantern, and Freegate. Now, Lantern and Siphon both receive funding from us. Freegate has never applied. And Ultrasurf has never been in the OTF portfolio until this year. So we couldn't fund them. They were being funded on the federal side. And so if you look at the entire package, it's really all about Ultrasurf.
Right.
Which has been traditionally what this group has been pushing all along. But now they have a coalition of internet freedom experts of whom nobody's ever heard. And suddenly they're supporting 4 tools, 2 of which we already support and who have signed on to save internet freedom.tech.
Okay, well, hopefully people will start digging in a little bit around this lobbying effort as well. I actually just thought of a question, and I'll go back to the ones that are coming in. But we know that the State Department has kind of been eviscerated as well in the last number of years. Does the fact that there's lack of personnel or change of personnel also feed into this kind of attack against OTF, or is that totally separate?
The State Department's DRL program has our partner Internet Freedom Funding Program, and they are phenomenal. I mean, they're really, really good. And they are, our partners. We have always coordinated with them to make sure that the life cycle of technology was covered, because they have the ability to fund projects for 500,000 and up. And we want to fund all the small, emerging projects and the development and getting proof of concept to market availability and things like that. So we've always worked very closely, and the DRL Internet Freedom team is great. As you mentioned, yes, the State Department as a whole has been gutted, but we have a lot of support in the divisions, right? Like East Asia Pacific or MENA or Near East, because so many people there depend on OTF technologies. I think that, if they were permitted to speak, that they would be really champions of what we're going through now. Unfortunately, you probably know, in the United States at this point, freedom of speech is not a thing anymore. And in Washington, D.C., everything's about a loyalty test.
Right. So it's not easy for people to speak out and show their support. But that brings me to another question, which is phrased in this way: living in a swing state, is there anything extra I can do beyond just call our legislator to help OTF, like a person or resource we should point our legislators at?
If you are living in a swing state or any state, honestly, you should reach out to your legislators, your senators, your representatives, and tell them how you think OTF is important. I mean, the great thing about the Open Technology Fund and Radio Free Asia is that we have had really, really strong bipartisan, bicameral support this entire time. I mean, the OTF authorization acts were both introduced by Republicans.
Right.
This is not a partisan issue. Freedom, human rights, democracy, internet freedom, these are all understood to be essential to our values as a nation, our national security, and, frankly, to all the people the US government funds to do good work around the world. How can they do that and not be in danger if we can't protect them?
I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I mean, some of the questions revolve around what to do in this present moment to help OTF, right? But I also think one of the important things to remember is OTF is a very innovative organization. And I don't mean innovative in the Silicon Valley way. I mean, it really runs well as an organization. I think there's a lot of important lessons that others can learn from the ways in which OTF was built over time. So in that spirit, I'm going to ask a question which is phrased in this way. There's so many challenges at OTF. And forget about the present for a moment, but when things were working relatively well, of all those challenges, was it getting the technology right? Was it about politics or the funding? Was it about supporting the best and best supported plan? So can you talk a little bit about, you did create an ecosystem. I really like that phrase, right? It wasn't simply about like that tool, this tool, but creating a whole ecosystem. So can you talk a little bit maybe about some of the challenges you encountered and then overcame to create that ecosystem?
Well, I mean, the biggest challenge was trust. I mean, who wants to trust the US government?
Right.
That was brutally difficult. Also, because I firmly believed that the best technologists were independent developers, technologists. And so to earn trust in this community is incredibly difficult. At the time, there were so many just, lone rangers doing phenomenal things, but we wanted to really weave everybody together so that the whole was bigger than the parts. So I think that earning trust with the users, with the developers, with the activists, the digital trainers, all of the partners in our ecosystem was the hardest thing we had to do. Then, of course, at the time, nobody even understood what internet freedom meant. They thought everything was about access, but what good is access if you're going to be thrown in prison for accessing, right? So creating an awareness of what exactly internet freedom was also very difficult. But 8 years later, we're way past that. Does that answer your question?
No, it does. It does. And I, know this community well, and it is a big achievement to achieve that trust, right? And that's in part what is so tragic about the present moment, is that it took a lot of work to build this up, not just simply technologically, but you could only build the technology because you created the kind of sociological and political dynamics that allowed for that technology to
it's it's a feedback loop, right? Because when you put technologists with the at-risk communities they're serving, it makes the product better.
Right.
And also the community knows that, you're not some jerk that's just, being paid to do something. You actually care about what you're doing. And that's super important. The hardest thing in my job was shielding the organization and the projects and the users and the ecosystem from any of the crap from above me. So this lobby campaign, for existence, who has been, after us for a decade now. And my job is to shield everybody so they can do what they do. And we are not in danger.
Right. Okay, so more questions. They're kind of nonstop here.
Great.
So,
I love I hate public speaking, but I'm happy to answer questions.
So HOPE just had a panel by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is a key US-based organization for defense of freedom of speech. To what extent has their work had an impact on OTF, given that EFF focuses mostly on the United States?
Oh my God, EFF is phenomenal. I mean, they are geniuses, and the work that they do is critical. We worked with them on Serpbot Let's Encrypt project, which has, I don't remember how many, I think 100 million or 200 million now secure websites and certificates that have been issued. I think EFF is extraordinary, and the work they do is top notch. Jillian York is on our advisory council, and her acuity and passion is so impressive. And I cannot possibly convey how incredible our advisory council members are. And EFF has played a very large part in helping move the internet freedom agenda. Frankly, they were leading. But because we are focused on foreign outside of the country, we have not been able to fund domestically focused projects. But the reality is, we all know technology is universal, right? If I can call you on Signal here, I can call you on Signal in China. It doesn't matter. So, those of us on the team always knew that our work was going to benefit people working on domestic internet freedom as well.
That's right. And one of our keynote speakers earlier this week, Idalin Bobe, does security trainings for protests in the United States, anti-racism protests, right? And we've seen just how intense they're getting and how important security, or as she put it, self-defense. Security is self-defense, right?
It is.
So these tools have network effects, so they can be used anywhere and everywhere. That's the point. That's why.
Exactly.
So another question, what suggestions or requests might you have for the HOPE audience? And many people who contribute to HOPE do have techie skills. So what suggestions do you have to help achieve some of the goals you talked about today?
Okay, so I think that for anybody in the community that wants to help the OTF, I think that the best place to go is the SaveInternetFreedom.tech site, which is the front line of the grassroots movement. But also, there are probably so many little things that need to be done that we can't do because we're so focused on survival. You mentioned something earlier that I forgot to say. I mean, one of the reasons why we created OTF this way is because we did want to share our expertise. So, for example, our web app interface is open source, and we want other funders, especially emerging small funders, to be able to implement that. Everything we create for us internally is to be used by everybody else.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that's important.
Right. I'm glad you make that point because, funding tools and infrastructure plumbing is often not sexy, but so important.
So not
And I'm always like, I get so frustrated. And that's why something like both DRL and OTF are so important in this landscape, right? They're really, really committed to that. But it's also a time for other groups, with resource capacity to get over that. Plumbing is not sexy, but it has long-term consequences if you could really fund it over the long term, right?
And it's super expensive to fund.
Exactly. And it's you always have to fund it.
Yes, because you have to constantly, reinforce the stack as you go, right? So now we're doing SNI, and there's just every little piece has to be fortified constantly because the adversary, think about them, they are super, super wealthy, motivated, resource, evil, okay? They don't care about any values, so we have a disadvantage. But our advantage is our people. And, this really is David and Goliath. A teeny little group of people can defeat a monstrous regime.
Right. I know, absolutely. So someone asked, I actually would like you to list some of this off, even though it's available online, because I think it shows just how important OTF has been. But someone asked about all the different types of projects you have funded. You don't have to go into any depth, but can you give us a taste of the range of things that OTF has done?
Okay, so we talked a little bit about some of the labs and the fellowships that we do. So what has happened is from the very beginning, we identified gaps, like what were the future problems? With talent being bought up by Silicon Valley, how do we convince talented technologists to dedicate their work to helping other people? And, there are so many things like that we've done, but I'll give you a few highlights, right? These are not project highlights, these are success highlights. I'll skip those. Some of the projects we funded, obviously we've done rapid response in emerging censorship environments in dozens of countries around the world. An online harassment hotline in Pakistan for the journalists and human rights defenders. I mean, in the first 2 years of that operation, they got 3,000 cases via phone and email, 79% of which are first-time callers. So it was the first time these people could call anybody for help, right? Civic CBR, which is also a first of its kind rapid response platform that coordinates incident response and facilitates information sharing. This project was able to coordinate between 40 Iranian NGOs and technical service advisors. Tails, everybody knows about, Global Leaks, TibCert, GSM Map, Snowflake, NetAlert, F-Droid, free WeChat, free chat scope, free WeChat and WeChat Scope, which collects all the censored stuff from the Chinese censors. Tor, obviously, PyPal, the Python Package Index, CertBot, which we referred to before with the Let's Encrypt project. We did breaking research on the Great Cannon attack against Great Fire on GitHub and helped us really understand the project and their technologies. App Store censorship, Lantern, which is a circumvention tool, Mailvelope K9, which is obviously securing emails, IOTA, which is phenomenal. It's an internet outage detection analysis platform that probes 3.5 million networks worldwide. One of my favorite projects right now is the Geneva Project at University of Maryland. They're using machine learning to find new avenues of circumventing censorship. NoScript, there's just so many. I don't know if I even can touch it, but also one of the most important ones is WireGuard, obviously, because we have to secure VPNs because VPNs are the most widely depended on circumvention tool there is. And if the Chinese government can hijack the vulnerabilities in the VPN, we're screwed. So WireGuard is all about that, allowing VPNs to patch the vulnerabilities to avoid exploitation. Is that?
No, it does. And I know that a lot of these were acronyms and some people may not know what they are, but that's not the point. The point is that OTF has funded so many different projects that range from trainings to hotlines to tools. And as you mentioned, technologists often can get hired away by Silicon Valley, and it's important to both inculcate the desire, but also pay them well enough in order to work on these technologies. And we really have to wrap up. So what I'm going to do is, mostly thank you for taking the time to give us this prehistory, this history, and get us to the contemporary moment. And leave you with 30 last seconds to let our listeners know, to remind them that they can't give up on this. And then we will have to wrap it up. But thank you so much.
Okay, so in 30 seconds, we can't give up on this. We are not going to give up on this. This is much too important for way too many people to allow to be destroyed. So this is not going away. We will persist and we will survive and we will continue to do this work. And thank you for allowing me to have this time to talk about it. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And this talk will be available online, archived. And so everyone who's watching, please share it. This isn't simply about a talk. This is about the future of the open internet. Thank you for all you've done in the past and for being with us today.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.